Senator, thank you so much for being here. I guess in your introduction, we could have started out and said also candidate, former candidate for the GOP ticket for president, but we don't have enough time for that.
No, we don't.
Sorry, but we might get some really good insights. But let me just start out for a minute. I think when people think of you and the judiciousness that you approach policy, the word monomaniacal obsession rarely comes up. But you've been monomaniacally obsessed, it seems to me, with the question about the implementation of this new Every Student Succeeds Act.
Yep.
You're having a hearing tomorrow, the 3rd and 6th oversight hearings. What's going on? I mean, you were very, very active in supporting this act, but now you have got all sorts of concerns.
Well, I was very active in writing it, working with Patty Murray and Bobby Scott and John Klein. Here's the bottom line of it. After 7 years, we finally fixed No Child Left Behind. It took a lot of cooperation. We passed it by big majorities, 85-15 in the Senate. President Obama signed it. He was very good working with us.
Can you just say that again? 85-15,
yeah.
Has that happened in recent history?
Well, not on education policy.
Right.
So it was a big deal, and there was a unity of purpose about it. And the unity was this: almost everybody had gotten tired of the U.S. Department of Education acting like a national school board, telling 100,000 public schools and 3.5 million teachers how to do their job. And so we had the American Federation of Teachers, the National Education Association, the national governors, everybody lined up saying that. Now what's happened is on the very first instance where the Department of Education has a chance to write a rule implementing that law, they get an F. I mean, they've been brazen and deceitful and dishonest and unprofessional in doing it.
It's not only you that have given them a failing grade, it's actually the Congressional Research
Well,
Service, right?
the Congressional Research Service looked at this rule and concluded last week in an announcement that it wasn't authorized by the law. And they said there's a statutory construction that says you follow the plain language of the law. And it concluded they didn't, and it's a very simple idea. I mean, the department has decided that it'd be a nice idea to equalize spending in all the schools. That is a good idea. But the Congress has said on 2 occasions that you can't require it from Washington. In 1970, we said you have to have comparable spending, but you may not include teacher salaries. That's the law. Then we said in December, the law the president signed, that the federal government may not require equalized spending. Yet the department precisely did that in its rule, which to me is absolutely astonishing. And I'm going to fight it with everything I've got on a matter of principle, because our job was to unleash the creativity of classroom teachers and school board members and parents to apply their common sense to the children in their school. We don't get any smarter flying up to Washington once a week, or any more compassionate, and then go back home the next weekend. So we're going to pay a lot of attention to this and put the spotlight on it, and not just us. The same coalition that helped us pass the law is just as exercised as I am. And when you get the governors and the American Federation of Teachers and the NEA and the chief state school officers all objecting, you've got a powerful force that needs to be listened to.
Now, tomorrow you've got Randy Weingarten appearing in the committee. Many of you know Randy will be here later today and is president of the American Federation of Teachers. I don't know if you guys pal around a lot, but is she with you or against you tomorrow?
You should ask her.
Okay.
I mean, I know better than to speak for somebody else, but I know Randy's position on this.
Yeah, tell me.
I mean, she strongly supported the law that we passed, because she didn't think Washington should be telling states how to evaluate teachers. I didn't either. Now, I was governor of Tennessee in '83 and '84 when we became the first state to pay teachers more for teaching well, but that didn't mean I wanted Washington telling me how to do it. So when I got here, I was opposed to Washington ordering this. She feels the same way on that, and you should ask her how she feels about it.
I plan to. I think one of the interesting things, I just read a speech that you gave recently, and I don't know where you folks can get it, maybe the senator knows, but it was kind of a civics lesson, and you go through talking about what you didn't get in the bill. You talk about what Michael Bennett, Senator Bennett of Colorado, didn't get in the bill, and here's what we came, and you're sort of educating people about what the powers of a voted senator, a senator that was voted for and put into office versus a bureaucrat are. And I'm wondering, as you sort of sorted through this, who are the enemies of the approach you've outlined and that you're trying to defend the prerogatives of the legislature?
Well, I don't like to use the word enemy, but the person I was trying to educate was John King, who's the new secretary. He was testifying that day. And what I was saying was, and this goes back to this subject of equalizing spending in schools. Senator Bennett, a very good former school superintendent, wanted to change that 1970 law that says you must have comparable services in schools that get money from the federal government and schools that don't. But you can't count teacher salaries when you figure that out. Well, he points out that's 85% of the money, and that's not very good comparability. That's a good argument, but he withdrew his amendment because there wasn't support for it, because a majority didn't think you should order that from Washington, because the result could be huge transfers of teachers, causing local school districts to have to take money from some schools to other schools, causing whole states to change their school equity education formulas. Now, maybe they should, but should you do it from here? The Congress said no. I offered a way to change it. I said, let's just take all the available federal money, and I could count up about $24 billion, not counting school lunches and disability and things like that. And I said, let's say to Tennessee, you can take all those federal dollars, turn them into scholarships for low-income children. That'd be about 20% of all the children in Tennessee. You could give them each $2,100 and let it follow them to the school that they were assigned to. And I argued that that would be the best way to take federal dollars and put it where the low-income children were. But I got voted down. I got 43 votes. So I wouldn't expect the Department of Education then to say, we like Alexander's idea, we'll just legislate it. That's what they're doing. And they can't do that.
Have they responded to you? Has the administration?
No, they've responded with a lot of gobbledygook and double talk. I mean, I really don't like it, as I hope you can tell.
Let me ask you, a deeper question.
I mean, I would never do that. I was the education secretary, and I worked with the Democratic Congress.
So how would you have done, if you were education secretary?
I would have respected the law.
Yeah.
I would have respected the law. I mean, I have enough respect for our system of government to say, I don't like, well, I'll give you an example. I didn't like the federal government taking over the student loan program, and I fought it when I was education secretary, but the Democrats put in instead a program where about 25% of all student loans then were in the federal government. I didn't write some rules saying nullifying the law. I implemented the law as it was written. So that's what should have been done. And what should be done.
When you see, you also ran for president and ran for the head of the ticket in your party. And when you see,
it was a quieter time.
Yeah, quieter. Well, let me just ask you about the difference in that time for a minute and kind of go big picture for a minute. I think a lot of the folks who essentially won a national school board and want to set standards are worried that the child in some parts of the country may not be, learning at a standard and level consistent sort of with modern rationality, if you will. And I'm just wondering what you think the right approach is. If you have a real devolution like ESSA is promoting, how do you assure that you don't have some parts of the country with very bright, very well-educated people that embrace the Enlightenment and other folks that are just choosing a very different, I would say, a more faith-based path? And I think that's some of the tension. Do you agree?
I agree. That's exactly the argument. It's been the argument 25 or 30 years. The thing to start with is that the federal money, we call it Title I money, most of the audience knows more about that than I do, really. That's about 4% of all the federal dollars that go to schools. Now, there's some more federal money that goes to schools. It gets up to 9%. But to get this money, it's 4% of the money. So the first question you ask is, for 4% of the money, do you get to tell a teacher, how to evaluate, how do you get to tell a school district how to evaluate teachers, how to turn around schools, what the standards ought to be, what the tests ought to be, how many tests do you give, whether you can give credit to effort? I mean, that's what the department was doing. But to answer your question directly, the two paths are this. One, a Washington edict to improve learning for a child in Sacramento as well as Maryville. In 100,000 schools, 50 million children, 3.5 million teachers. Order it from here. The other path is create an environment in which you move toward that goal. And what I tried to do in the 1989, 90, or 91 and 2 is President Bush had called all the governors together, the first president in 1988, first Bush, and they created national education goals: math, science, English, history, geography. That was a big step for governors and the country. And my job in 91 and 2 was to try to move the country toward those goals. And we tried to do that by encouraging higher standards, better testing, choices of schools. But we tried to do it state by state and community by community, not by Washington edict. And in fact, in 1992, when the Democratic Congress passed an Elementary and Secondary Education Act that I thought had too many orders from Washington, I urged President Bush to veto the bill because it would constitute creating a national school board. I use those words.
Right.
And he threatened to veto it, and it didn't pass. But since then, gradually, the argument that you just made has come to the forefront, and people have said, here's a problem, we better order it solved, and they order it from here. And you just don't have the capacity to do that from here. And in addition, you create big backlashes. Look at what happened to Common Core. The governors were moving ahead with it, state by state. Washington gets involved, big backlash. You really set back the standards movement. Or look at teacher evaluation. The states were moving ahead with it. Washington said you could only do it these 7 ways. Big backlash. You get the NEA and the AFT working with the governors. Who ever heard of a thing like that? And it sets back teacher evaluation. So the most effective way to go to higher standards, better tests, better teaching, I think, is to create an environment in which you move that way, state by state, community by community.
And I've noticed,
you lead it, not order it.
And I've noticed on spending and whatnot, you've endorsed transparency and publishing, much more publishing of how dollars are spent, what teachers are paid.
Sure.
And that might be, will that have some sort of positive effect in the process?
Well, it should have. I mean, the best thing, in my view, about No Child Left Behind was the 17 tests that have to be reported to the public by ethnic group so that people can see how schools, teachers, and students are doing. We keep that. We keep that. But the problem had been that the U.S. Department of Education had been so involved in what to do about the results of the tests that people over the country were giving dozens and dozens of extra tests to get ready for those tests. And it wasn't good testing. It wasn't sensible testing, and every teacher knew it.
Right.
And that's what happens when you have too many Washington orders.
So just before I go to the audience, your time is short today, but it's the audience for a question. Let me ask you the most important question of the morning. If Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton run against each other, which looks likely in the next election, which do you think will be the best steward of the nation's educational interests in that educational portfolio?
Well, I haven't been able to predict
And that's not really an endorsement. That's just a
about
critique.
I haven't predicted anything right yet about what's happening this year, so I don't think I'll start now.
All right, let me go to the audience here. Stephanie, where are you? Okay, great. You have a question ready for us? We have questions in the audience? Okay, great.
Ned McCulloch from IBM. One of the remaining pieces of legislation that's out there that's important for workforce issues is Perkins. And I wanted to see if you thought that you would be able to move Perkins like you were able to move WIOA and ESSA before.
Yes, is the answer. I had breakfast this
Can
morning.
you give for the millions of people watching online a quick survey of what Perkins is?
Well, there are two kinds of Perkins. There's a Perkins scholarship. This Perkins is is a piece of legislation that works with technical training and technical
Okay.
institutes in the states. And Senator Enzi and Senator Casey are the Republican and Democrat in the Senate who are working with Senator Murray and me on that. We have the same kind of working relationship we did with fixing No Child Left Behind. I met with Congressman Klein this morning, the chairman of the House Education Committee. He's optimistic. They have a hearing on it today. So my hope is that we can pass it this year. The answer is yes. Senator McConnell has told me that if we can come up with important legislation that's bipartisan that the president will sign, he'll do his best to find time on the Senate floor for it.
Tomorrow, we're going to tune in and watch your hearing. What's going to be your opening question?
I'm going to ask Randy Weingarten what she thinks about a Department of Education that won't follow the law that she helped pass.
That'll be very interesting. Ladies and gentlemen, Senator Lamar Alexander. Thank you very much, Senator.
Thank you.